Hey, thanks for staying. I know it's a sacrifice, but I always enjoy spending a lot of time with this group of people. It's the group of people that I actually started my career with, frankly, are in this room, and so it's really fun for me to come back and spend time, meet everybody again. I moved to Oklahoma City a few years ago, and so coming back to Houston is coming home for me in a lot of ways. So Jason did a great intro. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jason. And it really does hit home in terms of what I want to spend some time talking to you about, and it is a great build on the conversations that you heard this morning. I hope it's a useful build on you, because what I want to share with you a little bit is some of the things that we've tried to do and that I've tried to do personally, but my whole leadership team is trying to do, and actually we're trying to get everybody in the company engaged in doing at Devon, which is being innovative, being creative. And actually just recently our CEO retired, and we have a new CEO, and the incoming CEO, in fact, one of his very strongly stated goals is that we want to really focus on increasing diversity of thought. It's a little bit of a twist on diversity. It's not diversity by, statistical targets of different profiles of people. He wants to create an environment where we have challenging discussions and really bring forward diverse perspectives so that we can find the best ways to be the most creative organization, the most creative people that we can be in the way that we do our work in the industry. And frankly, one of the great things about the oil and gas industry, and Bush said it this morning, it was a great setup, is this is a problem. The industry that I'm in, the upstream oil and gas industry, it's a problem. Of course, in downstream, it's a fantastic windfall, right? But for us guys in the upstream, we've created our own problem through our amazing creativity. And now we're going to go fix that problem for ourselves by continuing to be amazingly creative. So that's the challenge. So if I could hit the right button here. I'm the IT guy, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you heard about this morning. So the workforce is changing. So people, first thing you got to do is start about gaining some perspective on the people that you're leading. A lot of management theory that is in vogue today was invented during the Industrial Revolution. And popularized during the Industrial Revolution and very highly successful. Well, we all know we're not working in the same market industry. And I may have missed it a little bit on this box, but if you look at all the people who are younger than me in that chart, younger than I am, most of them, at least in their work life, have always had this thing called the internet as part of their business model. 72%, in fact, when you look at the current active workforce. That's different than most of, again, the environment that was prominent when most of current management theory was invented and again, popularized. When you look at the incoming workforce, and I think this is a chart that has a lot of interesting information on it, the workforce coming in, the 35 to now almost 40% of women joining the workforce are bachelor degree educated or better. Men, we're trailing. We need to get our act together a little bit here and catch back up on this statistic. But on average, you can see that the trend is climbing fast. So higher education system is working, at least here in the U.S., and it's going to continue to increase like that. And I would argue probably almost everybody in this room and most of the people that most of us work with on a daily basis are in that 35%. And so our leadership model needs to take that into account. But in all of this, internet and higher education, something that I find is very common is people don't necessarily feel very connected. They don't feel connected with each other. And so it creates scenarios like this where, where we expect immediate response from somebody, right, that you text or email, or I think that, so this is a great statistic. We built a building not that long ago. You know how long it takes somebody to be impatient waiting for an elevator? We figured out it was 14 seconds or something like that for somebody to be impatient waiting for an elevator. I think it takes 7 seconds for you to be impatient. Well, what does this say? 5 seconds upstairs? Did you check the Twitter account, right? But we need to create this. We need to create people working together, like-minded people working together towards a common goal. And then we want them sharing that common goal, the outcome, the solution that they created with each other. But what's stopping some of this from happening? Talked about that connection. We all exist in this world where there's all of this information coming at you all the time, right? So I'm here. I was in Europe, and the whole time I was in Europe, just not that long ago, I was hearing constantly about refugees fleeing from Syria. 5 years ago, I would never have heard about that story. But now it's on my mind. It's bothering me. What should we do, right? We have social responsibility to do something about that. In fact, there's all kinds of countries in Europe that are trying to do something about that. The EU is trying to pull themselves together. That's hard to do, but that's a problem that we would never have worried about 5 years ago. When I was in Europe, One of the main stories before this refugee story was coming online, one of the main stories they were worried about was California wildfires. Again, 5 years ago, they would have never heard about California wildfires, and now they're worried about California wildfires in England. So but why is that happening, right? How does that information flow like that, and what is the cause of that? What is the impact of that on your people, right? We hear about suicide bombers. We hear about commodity price, fluctuations. And what I think is interesting about this is, in parallel with that information age transformation that's gone on in this proliferation of information, more than anything else you can see in terms of crude oil pricing, which is what this picture shows, it's much more volatile. It's not so much that it's gone up or gone down, it's that it's going up and down a lot more than it ever used to. Creates stress. Home value indexes are fluctuating. We heard earlier today about the Chinese crisis. We're worried about the Chinese crisis because that's affecting world demand markets for our commodities, both upstream and downstream commodities, right, in the world. So we got all this bad news coming at us that we never used to have. And again, what's the impact on that? What's the impact on your people of that? And what are they looking for? They're looking for something to feel connected with. They're looking for a purpose, a cause. This is not generational. This is not about the new generation coming in or the old generation of Gen Yers or Gen Xers. People want to feel connected to a purpose. We need innovation. We need creativity. We heard about that earlier today. So we've got a group of employees who are highly educated, who are motivatable and can have a huge impact on the organization or on the industry, have a huge amount of capacity. We saw about their education. We saw about what they're capable of doing. And the world today, upstream companies, we need to innovate our way out of our own problem. Downstream businesses need to maximize profits and be ready for when the crack spread shrinks again, potentially, or when there's other disruption that comes online. We need to innovate. So the question is, how do I do it? How do I go from a really smart, highly educated, disengaged employee to one who's got some passion and is helping so that we can achieve innovation? That's what I'm hoping to share a little bit of perspective with you. Because the capacity's there, the potential's there. So we can, if we leverage the power of our employees and our people, we can make a huge impact on our businesses. So what do you need to do? You need to focus on what you can control. And so I'm trying to build on a lot of things that I've heard, a lot of research that I've read, a lot of books that I've read, and a lot of people that I've heard talk. And so I'm just going to share with you some of my beliefs and some of the beliefs that I think we're starting to work on in Devon. So the first step is everybody needs to recognize the current reality. You need to be brutally honest. One of the things I think that scares employees most and makes them feel disassociated with an organization is when they feel like they're not getting the truth. They're not getting the whole story. They're not getting a full perspective of what the problems are and what the real motivations are that are affecting the decisions that are made in your company, right? So for Devon, we're an upstream oil and gas business. We're a publicly traded upstream oil and gas business. So we have tried to be very transparent about what we think the commodity price market is going to do, right? We're not very optimistic it's going to come back very fast. So we need to get everybody on the same page around that, right? We're not wanting to hear hallway conversations about, well, you've seen that cycle, it's gone up and it's gone down, and we're going to get saved by the commodity price coming back up, right? That's not where we want our employees to be. We want them to understand this is probably going to be like this for a little while, if not a long while. And so what our challenge is not to wait for something else to save us, but to be prepared to create the business models that are going to be the business models that make us profitable and beat the competition in a market that looks a lot like it does right now. Then you need to find ways to have people feel a sense of purpose. So I've heard some people tell me that the oil and gas industry, in fact, I've been approached by people in universities who've told me, faculty members and others who've told me that the oil and gas industry is, bad, evil, damaging to the environment. So how do you create, if that's the mindset of some of the people coming out of campuses, how do you create an environment where those people coming out of campuses, as well as your existing employee base, feel a purpose? So in IT, I'll keep this personal. In IT, I tell people there isn't a job in our in our organization that isn't strategic. We, in the industry, like to talk about, well, there's these strategic functions, and then there's these other things that were whatever, tactical, transactional, something else. I don't buy that model. I think, so we heard about it, a secretary can be one of the most innovative idea generators in an organization. There isn't a single person who doesn't have the potential perspective to be very, very innovative about the way your business operates. But the way you get that out of them is you work on behaviors that reinforce that kind of buy-in, that kind of engagement. I'll talk more about that. And you've got to empower and promote diversity of thought and creativity. And this is one that's really behavioral. So I'm going to not use the word culture because it's very, very hard to change company culture. But you can definitely focus on specific behaviors that you want to reinforce or not reinforce in your organization. And in my mind, this last one is all about behavior. It's all about the way that you respond when somebody brings forward an idea that you don't agree with, or that your colleagues don't agree with, that you think is dumb, potentially. But they're not. They're just challenging. So I'll go back to that diversity thing in a minute here, too, and talk a little bit about that. So everybody needs to recognize the current situation. If your staff don't know what's really going on in an organization, I already talked about this a little bit, they can't help you solve the problem. And I think that that's something that breaks down a very significant, long-held value in leadership, for example. For a long time, higher leaders in an organization maintained a sense of power in an organization by retaining information that they felt like was special. And what we're finding more and more is there really isn't a lot of information that we shouldn't share with every employee in the company. They're obviously mature. You saw the statistics. They're mature enough to handle it. They're smart enough to digest it and process it. It helps them with their day-to-day tasks and operational activities because they can put it into perspective of what's motivating the company's leadership. Being honest builds trust, right? So you as a person, whoever you are, leadership, individual contributor in an organization, consultant, be honest. Be forthcoming. That builds trust. I'm a terrible consultant. I did a little consulting in my years, and I always say I'm a terrible salesman as a consultant because I would just tell you what I felt like you needed to hear, the truth, and you could tell me to go away, or I could maybe help you, but I'm always just going to tell you the truth. I'm not a very good salesman at making up a pitch, but I think I can help, and so this is what you might need to hear. Maybe you don't want to hear, but that's important. That builds trust, and it helps people do better because they get a good handle on what the reality is. And last thing is I think sometimes we don't tell people the truth, like we don't like to give people bad performance reviews, for example, or we don't really want to give people the bad news about what's going on in the industry. I remember I had all of my managers in the room not that long ago, and I tried to make sure we were all on the same page. We did this to the natural gas price in 2008, 9, and 10. Now we've just done this again to the oil price in the U.S. onshore North American continent. There is no reason to believe this is going to go away anytime soon. We're really, really good at doing what we do. We created our own problem. The opportunity there is not to give up. The opportunity there is to go figure out how to make a ton of money in the current environment, not wait for somebody else to save you. That's important. People need to hear that. It's not a negative message. It's just the truth. And then you build from there. So we've started to find ways to have people feel like a sense of involvement and purpose. We've called it innovation. We've called it lots of kinds of things. I'll talk about these first two. So we've talked about idea buckets. One challenge with idea buckets, they're a good thing. It's a very good thing. And tracking all of the ideas that people generate are really good. We had some ideas about things like, we should probably sell the guacamole in the company cafeteria for a little, less than, it should be discount or be on the healthy menu or something like that. The sidewalk out here should be a little wide, right? I mean, people are going to put ideas out there that are a little wacky. You got to find a way to gracefully handle those, right? You can't create a culture where those people get punished for, not really being in the spirit of things. But what you really got to figure out how to do is cultivate those ideas that come out of those things that can be very, very beneficial. And one of the ways that we found to do that is by taking some of those ideas that flow in and turning around and exposing those ideas as problem statements. What would it look like if we could solve this business problem? How could you form a team, anybody in the company, go form a team that could help us address this business problem? In fact, don't even just form a team of people in IT, form a team of people from across the company. In fact, form a team of people across the company and include some service providers in the way that you're going to go try to find an answer to that problem. Or technology providers in the way that you're going to go try to solve a problem. Because obviously, it's worth doing, right? We put it out there. We say there's a real potential here. It's probably not a simple solution, or somebody would have already done it. And it's maybe not a solution that we have all the knowledge or the capability to address internally. So go get ideas and bring them together. We found some really, really valuable results have come from that. And I would say that maybe where I would add to the presentation this morning is, for me, what's really important is to showcase the successes of those teams. Because I find that the most valuable, the most impactful innovations are generated by not one person, but by a team. Sometimes there's a catalyst in that team who's somebody who pushes the team, but it's really important to celebrate the activities of all of those people who contributed and recognize the contributions of all of those people that contributed. If it's an individual, great, but a lot of times, if you look at almost any invention or any innovation, it isn't one person, and it isn't one discipline that got you there. Diversity of thought. I want to talk a little bit about this. This is behavioral, right? So there's Albert Einstein. Who can argue with Albert Einstein? But you've got a system of work and a system of doing things in your organization today. It got you where you are right now. If you're going to get out of it, you've got to think differently, which means you've got to have different perspectives on how to solve the problem. I tell people it's about managing smarter or working smarter, not working harder. Working harder is just turning the crank faster. You've got to find a way to replace the crank with something that's completely different, that's going to change the industry. So I look at our current problem in the upstream oil and gas business, and I think there's 3 ways out. We can get better at doing what we do. That's turning the crank harder. We can look at the things that we do and the data that we create and start looking for other value propositions that we could potentially go and take on. That's a step change. So we could look at things like, and I've shared this with a couple people, we sold $1 million of our seismic data. We made $1 million off of our seismic data this year, first time we've ever sold our data. Something that we all thought was, in our industry, that's very sacrosanct. You don't ever sell your data. But we're starting to do that in areas where we've not got active operations. That's a small impact, but it's starting to crack a door in a way that we might make money that we weren't making money otherwise. The third area is I think we need to look at what we do as an industry and potentially look at completely different value chains that we might go and take on. A couple of examples I've used here in conversation is, deep water mining is taking off. Well, upstream oil and gas companies are really good at getting to deep water locations and doing stuff. Maybe we ought to be taking that on as a potential opportunity. I told a story about producing helium and how some of our most profitable wells actually accidentally produced helium last year. And we sold it for, I think it was $40 an MCF as opposed to $3 for natural gas. And so I'm scratching my head going, why don't we go do that? And that's making money. Why are we going after natural gas? But that's not something that gets easily inserted into, we're an oil and gas company. We produce oil and gas. So it's going to take a while to get us across the threshold on that. But diversity of thought means not having the conversation I just talked about, right? It means when the nutty CIO says, why aren't we drilling for helium, that people don't just go, that's not a really good idea because we're not a helium company, we're an oil and gas company, because that shuts the conversation down. Diversity of thought, right? I mean, it's over. I was done. I walked out of the room with my head down like this and said, okay, I'll go back to IT. But that's what you do, right? But that can't happen. That can't happen in your organization, right? You guys have to do it differently. Somebody comes up with a wacky idea, catch yourself before you go, not a good idea. Stop yourself. Figure out how to say, let me think about that. If that's all you can do in the moment, let me think about that, right? And then come back around and say, you know what, you said something and it stopped me. Can I talk to you more about that? Who else do you think might be able to offer an interesting perspective on that? Let's figure that out. So it takes systemic leadership and management support to cultivate diversity of thought. So you got to do all three of these things. You got to be honest about your current situation. You've got a very powerful, intelligent workforce in your organization. They're highly educated. They're motivated, but they need to feel connected. So that's the other thing you need to do, is make them feel connected, right? And the third thing you need to do is cultivate creativity and diversity of thought at an individual level, at a team level, and at an organizational level. I think if you do those three things in your sphere of influence, you'll see a change. You'll see a change in the way people work, and you'll see a change in your future. So that's really all I had to share today. Thank you for listening, and hope you guys enjoy the happy hour.
Outstanding job. Thank you very much, Ben. Can I ask you one question?
Sure, of course.
All right.
Of course.
So how about some advice for these folks here? They listened to Robert this morning on being a personal, individual motivator, innovator in their organization, right? And you're kind of talking to some of the same threads as you threw back to this morning as well in this. How do they get started, right? I mean, this is, some great ideas. They want to take them back, put them in their pocket, and after they leave this event, where would they start in their organization? What could they influence?
I would start with what you can influence. Right? Sorry, now I don't need to shout. I would start with your team. Start with your group. It doesn't have to be a whole IT team. It doesn't have to be a whole operations team. It can be one little team. It can be you as an individual reaching out to some peers and saying, hey, I see an opportunity here. Would you want to get together with me to go work on this? So whatever your scale of influence and sphere of influence is in the organization, I don't think there's any reason why you can't follow those 3 steps to take it with you and go try it. Hey, what's the reality that you're trying to work with? Find some other people who are like-minded about that reality and figure out how to build a team spirit around how to address that reality and really work together in a productive, cohesive way. And when you disagree with somebody, go back to your relationship books and listen, right? Building that bond is not about being the loudest talker in the room. It's about being the best listener in the room.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent, Ben.